This video will provide a brief overview to the gradebook in Moodle and will be followed by subsequent videos that talk about how to set up categories and items in your gradebook to match your grading schema for the class and how to actually enter and track scores. So to begin with, if you're in your Moodle course, say on the front page, the easiest way to access your gradebook is to go into the course administration block, and under course administration, click the gradebook setup link. This will take you into the gradebook focused on the actual setup, and I recommend that you before the term starts or very early in the semester, take some time to actually set up the main components of your gradebook so that you've got a framework within which to enter grades as the course goes on. In your gradebook, initially you will see essentially an empty gradebook that will have just the course total listed. You think of this as a big container or a bucket into which you'll be able to assemble other different kinds of items and tell Moodle then how to add up or aggregate those scores to come up with this total course score. By default, your total course score will just take the name of your course title, and you'll see this course total down here at the bottom. The kinds of things that you can add into your Moodle gradebook, and we'll go into this in more detail in the gradebook setup video, are that you can add categories, which would be smaller buckets inside this larger bucket in which you could have individual items. So for example, if you're going to have multiple reading response papers and those are going to be a certain percentage of the grade, you could add a category for response papers and then have all of the individual response papers inside that category, and then tell Moodle how much that category is going to count toward the total grade. You can also manually add grade items to the gradebook. This is useful if you are going to be having major individual items in class outside of Moodle that are going to generate grades, and you want to have an item in the gradebook where you can enter in those grades. So for example, you might be having the midterm or final in class, and you need a place in the gradebook, a placeholder in the gradebook to enter those grades. You would add that as a grade item. What's not shown here is that there are a number of activities in Moodle that you would add to the front page that are themselves graded activities, such as typically assignments or quizzes, forums if you set them up with ratings, Turnitin assignments, and other things like various external tools we have in Moodle. If those external tools are accepting grades from the external tool, then those Moodle will automatically add those to your grade book as well. And there are ways you can control where they factor into the total course grade. I just wanted to point out that if you were going to edit the properties of this empty gradebook, and editing the properties of the top level container itself, you would come over here to this edit menu, select edit settings, and if we expand all of the options here, I just want to point out a couple of these. When we talk about setting up the gradebook and figuring out how to let Moodle know how the items will be combined to come up with the total grade, this aggregation pull down is going to be very important, because this will tell you how Moodle should treat the grades on the individual items and categories. There is an option to exclude empty grades from the grade calculation. So for example, if you've got items set up in your gradebook but students haven't done it yet, by default Moodle will not count those as zeros. If you want, you can unselect that default, in which case anything that doesn't have a grade will be automatically treated as a zero. Again, the default is to exclude the empty grades. You can put in a more descriptive category name, and that is useful for when you are, say, exporting the different columns of your gradebook, if you want to bring those data into Excel. You can specify the grade type. Typically the default is to have numerical values. In general, that's the safest thing to do, is to save, just to keep that default. And then you can specify what the maximum grade is. By default, the maximum grade for your total course grade is 100, which makes sense. Students read that sort of as 100%. And there are some other things here that you can adjust as well. In addition to just the overall setup tab here, there are some other preferences that you can go through. By and large, the defaults on those are fine. Unless you really want to change some setting, I wouldn't even bother going into there. And then there is the View tab that will provide you different ways of entering and viewing grades, and we'll talk about that in a later video. And you can also export your gradebook information, say if you want to take it into Excel, or you can import grade data. For example, if you've tracked something in Excel and you want to get that data into Moodle, the import tab is very useful. But again, to begin with, I would direct you at the beginning of your semester to go into the Setup tab and get the basic arrangement of the gradebook set up to match how you are going to grade the course, and we'll talk about that in a later video.